Ethan Blake. The name alone carried power. He was the kind of man who made the stock market move with a single decision, confident, controlled, and dangerously focused. But power had a price, and for Ethan that price was love. Once years ago he had it all, the woman he adored, a future he believed in, and a heart that still knew how to feel. Her name was Elena, and she had been his world. Until the day she chose someone else. His rival. His enemy. Ethan never forgot the look in her eyes that morning. No apology, no tears, just quiet ambition. "You'll never understand, Ethan," she had said. "Love doesn't build empires. Power does." She walked away, leaving him with nothing but silence and shattered trust. Since then, Ethan had changed. He buried himself in work, building an empire so vast that even his enemies whispered his name with fear. He didn't laugh anymore. Didn't smile. Didn't let anyone close. His mansion, perched high above New York, was a palace of glass and marble, beautiful but cold. Staff moved quietly through the halls, careful never to disturb him. And that was exactly how Ethan liked it. Until the morning Lydia arrived. She came in quietly, dressed in a simple uniform, clutching a worn brown bag and an envelope of employment papers. The head housekeeper introduced her as a temporary replacement, just another worker in a long line of faces Ethan never remembered, barely looked up from his laptop. "Fine. Just make sure she knows the rules," he said coldly. "Yes, sir," the head maid replied. "And what are the rules?" Lydia asked softly. "You don't speak to Mr. Blake unless spoken to," the maid whispered. "He doesn't like unnecessary conversation." Lydia nodded, though something in her eyes said she wasn't afraid. That first week, Ethan didn't notice her much. He was too busy, meetings, phone calls, deals worth millions. But Lydia worked quietly, cleaning his office, arranging his books, and caring for the mansion like it was her own home. One evening, she noticed a small picture frame on his shelf, its glass cracked. Inside was a faded photo of a woman smiling beside Ethan, long before he became the man the world now feared. Lydia gently cleaned it and placed it upright. The next morning, Ethan saw it on his desk. He froze. He hadn't touched that photo in years. He called the head maid. "Who moved this?" he asked sharply. "I believe the new girl did, sir," the maid replied nervously. Ethan was silent for a moment. "Tell her not to touch my personal things again." But he didn't put the photo away. Days later, as Lydia dusted the piano in the living room, she began to hum, a soft melody, soothing and familiar. Ethan was walking down the hall when he heard it. He stopped. It was the same tune his mother used to sing when he was a boy. He stood quietly, listening from behind the door. For the first time in years, he didn't feel angry. He felt something else. Later that evening, Lydia crossed paths with him in the hallway. She froze for a moment, lowering her eyes. "Good evening, sir," she said politely. "You're the one who was humming earlier," Ethan said. His tone was calm, but curious. "Oh, I'm sorry if it disturbed you," she replied quickly. "No," he said after a pause. "It didn't." She smiled faintly. "That's a relief." Ethan walked away without another word, but something about that brief exchange stayed with him all night. The next morning, he caught himself waiting for her greeting. When she said softly, "Good morning, sir," he felt a strange warmth he hadn't felt in years. He didn't understand it. He didn't want to. But Lydia was different. She wasn't afraid to speak honestly, even when others wouldn't. When she noticed a mistake in the kitchen schedule, she politely corrected the head chef, even though everyone warned her not to interfere. When the other staff whispered about Ethan's temper, she just said, "Maybe he's not as cold as people think. Maybe he's just tired." Ethan overheard that. And for the first time in a long while, he smiled. He didn't know why. He didn't even realize it happened. But something inside him was waking up, slowly, quietly, against his will. The man who thought love was weakness was beginning to feel again. and he had no idea that the one person who would change his life forever had just walked into his mansion with a broom and a borrowed pair of shoes. Weeks passed, but something inside Ethan Blake had begun to change. He still wore the same cold expression, still ruled his company with precision, but his mansion no longer felt entirely silent. And the reason was Lydia. She had a quiet strength that couldn't be ignored. She didn't try to please him or impress him. She simply was gentle, kind, and real. While others treated Ethan like a god or a threat, Lydia treated him like a man. One who bled, one who broke, one who could still feel. One afternoon, she noticed him standing by the window, staring out at the rain. He had just returned from a board meeting that hadn't gone well. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold. Without thinking, Lydia said softly, "You look tired, sir." He turned, slightly surprised. "I don't get tired," he said. "Everyone does." She replied with a small smile. "Even people who think they don't." Ethan didn't respond, but when she walked away, there was the faintest trace of a smile on his face. That was Lydia's way. She spoke gently, but her words had weight. And slowly, Ethan began to let her in. He started asking small things. How her mother was doing, if she was getting enough rest, what she thought of the city lights from the mansion balcony. Sometimes she'd laugh, saying, "I've never seen a house so big that it feels empty." "It's not empty," Ethan would say. "It's quiet." "Too quiet can be worse than empty," Lydia replied. And those words stayed with him for days. Then came the night everything changed. Heavy storms swept through the city. Thunder rolled across the hills. Rain lashed against the windows. The mansion went dark as the power cut out. The staff scrambled for candles and flashlights, but most stayed downstairs. Ethan, alone in his study, tried to ignore the storm until he heard a soft knock. "Sir." Lydia's voice came from the doorway. "Yes. The generator's being fixed, but it might take a while. I brought some candles." She stepped inside, the golden light flickering across her face. For the first time, Ethan really looked at her. Not as an employee, but as a person. "You don't seem afraid of storms," he said quietly. "I used to be," she replied, placing a candle on his desk. "But my mother used to say storms are just the sky cleaning itself." I guess I believed her. Ethan let out a soft breath. "I haven't heard something that poetic in a long time." There was a long silence. Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, only the soft glow of the candles. Ethan spoke again, this time with a tone she'd never heard before. "When I was younger, I loved storms too," he said. "My mother and I would sit by the window and count the seconds between the lightning and the thunder." "She sounds like a wonderful woman," Lydia said softly. "She was," Ethan whispered. "She died when I was 22. After that, I stopped listening to storms." Lydia looked at him. The man everyone feared suddenly felt human. "Maybe it's time you listen again," she said. And for a long moment they just sat there, two souls divided by class and circumstance, yet somehow connected by something deeper. That night changed everything. After the storm, Ethan found himself noticing things he never had before. The way Lydia laughed with the kitchen staff, how she tied her hair when she worked, how she smiled even on her hardest days, hated it. Or at least, he told himself he did. Because feelings meant weakness, and weakness was something Ethan Blake didn't allow. But love has a way of breaking rules. One evening, he found her cleaning the main hall. "Lydia," he said suddenly. She turned, startled. "Yes, sir." "You've been working hard lately. I was thinking, maybe you should join me for dinner tomorrow. As a thank you." She hesitated. "Sir, I appreciate it, but that wouldn't be right." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. And people talk." Her tone was polite, but firm. Ethan respected that, and yet it stung more than he expected. "All right," he said finally. "As you wish." Word still spread through the mansion. Whispers filled the corridors that the CEO had taken interest in the maid. When Ethan overheard two employees gossiping, he stepped in sharply. "If I ever hear any of you speak disrespectfully about her again," he said coldly, "you'll be packing your things before sunset." That was the first time anyone had seen him defend someone with that kind of passion. But peace doesn't last forever. A week later, While Lydia was tending to the garden, a black limousine pulled into the driveway. From it stepped Elena, Ethan's ex-fiancée. Elegant, confident, and clearly regretful. Ethan saw her from his office window and felt the past flood back like a storm. Met her in the living room, his tone distant. "Why are you here, Elena?" "Because I made a mistake," she said. "I thought I wanted power, but all I ever wanted was you." Lydia walked in moments later, not realizing who was there. When she saw Ethan standing with Elena, her hand on his arm, eyes soft and pleading, she froze. Elena turned, her voice smooth. "Oh, you must be the help." Lydia lowered her gaze. "Excuse me, sir. I'll come back later." Ethan tried to speak, "Lydia, wait," but she was already gone. That night, Lydia packed her things quietly. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for everything, sir. I'll always be grateful. But some places aren't meant for people like me." The next morning, Ethan woke to find her gone. The halls were silent again. The mansion, once alive with warmth, had turned cold. And for the first time in years, Ethan Blake realized what he had truly lost. Not an employee, not a housekeeper, but the only woman who had ever touched his soul without asking for anything in return. The mansion felt colder than ever. Ethan sat alone in his study, the silence echoing louder than any storm. It had only been a day since Lydia left, but to him, it felt like years. He tried to focus on work, but the numbers blurred. The documents, the calls, the meetings, none of it mattered. All he could see was her face, her smile, her voice saying, "Some places aren't meant for people like me." He pushed away from his desk and stood up abruptly. For the first time in his life, Ethan Blake canceled every meeting, ignored every call, and walked out of his empire without looking back. He drove for hours. Through the city, the suburbs, the outskirts, following nothing but his instinct. Remembered the little things she once mentioned, her love for quiet places, her favorite cafe outside the city, the one she said had the best coffee and peace of mind. That's where he went. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as he stepped in. Tea was small, simple, and smelled of freshly baked bread. And there she was, behind the counter, wiping a table, wearing the same gentle smile that once lit up his mansion. When she looked up and saw him, her hands froze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You found me," she said quietly. "I've been looking everywhere," Ethan replied. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain." "There was nothing to explain," Lydia said softly. "I saw enough." "You saw what you wanted to see," Ethan said, stepping closer. "You think I still love her? Lydia, that woman broke me years ago. You're the one who healed me." Her eyes glistened, but she shook her head. "You don't understand, Ethan. I didn't just leave because of her." Ethan frowned. "Then why?" Lydia took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of you losing everything because of me." Ethan looked confused. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated, then pulled out a folded envelope from her apron pocket. "A week before I left, someone came to the mansion. He said he worked for your ex, for Elena's company. He told me if I didn't disappear, they would leak something to the press. Something that could destroy your reputation. They said people would believe I was using you to climb up. That your company would suffer. So I left." Ethan's eyes darkened. "They threatened you?" "It doesn't matter," Lydia said. "I just didn't want to be the reason your empire fell apart." Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking for the first time. "Lydia, do you really think I care about that? Everything I've built means nothing without you. I'd burn it all down if it meant keeping you safe." Tears rolled down her cheeks as he gently took her hands. "You are my world now," he said softly. "Not the company. Not the money. You." For a moment, the world outside the cafe disappeared. Tea was just them, the billionaire and the houseworker, two hearts that had finally found their truth. Then Ethan smiled faintly. "You should know something, Lydia. Before I came here, I had my lawyers look into that leak. It was fake. Your ex-fiancé tried to set you up to make sure I'd push you away. She underestimated both of us. Lydia gasped. You knew. I do now, he said. And I'm never letting anyone use my past to ruin my future again. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. This isn't about status or class, he said. It's about peace. And you're the only peace I've ever known. Lydia covered her mouth, tears falling freely now. Ethan, don't say anything yet, he whispered. Just promise me you'll come home. Not as a worker, but as the woman I love. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, I'll come home. And when he pulled her into his arms, the cafe seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of rain tapping gently on the windows, the same way it did the night they first spoke. For Ethan Blake, the man who once believed love was weakness, he had finally learned that real strength was in letting someone in. The days that followed felt like a dream Ethan didn't want to wake up from. For the first time in years, laughter filled his home again. Lydia's presence brought warmth to every corner of the mansion that once felt like an empty museum. She had become his calm, his peace, his reason to breathe. But peace never lasts long in a man's world built on power. He started one morning, when the headlines exploded across every major news outlet. Ethan Blake under investigation for corporate fraud. Within hours, the board demanded an emergency meeting. Investors panicked. Journalists camped. Outside his gates, documents, forged, twisted, linked his name to illegal offshore accounts. But Ethan knew the truth. And the truth cut deeper than any lie. One of the transactions was made under Lydia's name. When Lydia found out, her hands shook. She stormed into his office, eyes red from crying. Why didn't you say it wasn't you? You're letting them ruin you. Ethan stood by the window, silent, staring into the distance. Because clearing my name means destroying yours, he said quietly. And I'd rather lose everything I built than see them tear you apart. Her tears fell. Freely now he turned and looked at her, really looked. The woman who cleaned his home, healed his heart, and now unknowingly held his future in her hands. You shouldn't have to pay for my mistakes, she whispered, smiled faintly. Maybe I'm not paying for your mistakes. Maybe I'm finally paying for my own. That night, Lydia packed her things and left without saying goodbye. Days turned into weeks. Ethan barely showed up to meetings. His empire was collapsing, but none of it mattered. The house was quiet again, painfully quiet. Until one afternoon, a small brown envelope arrived on his desk. No name. No address. Just a single note inside. The truth is never lost. It's only waiting to be found. Attached was a USB drive. Ethan played it, and what he saw changed everything. Video evidence, documents, phone recordings, all pointing to Victoria, his ex-fiancée, and her assistant. Lydia had gone after them herself. She had gathered proof, risking everything to clear his name. Victoria was arrested. Ethan's reputation was restored. But Lydia, she was gone. Months passed. Ethan searched everywhere, hospitals, small towns, even churches. Nothing. Until one Saturday morning, his car stopped outside a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. He didn't know why. He just felt something. And there she was. Behind the counter, apron dusted with flour, hair tied loosely, smiling as she handed a cup of coffee to a customer. Ethan froze. For the first time in a long time, his heart remembered how to beat. She turned, and when their eyes met, time stopped. You disappeared again, he said softly. She smiled faintly. I thought you deserved peace first. He stepped closer, voice low, steady. Peace means nothing if you're not in it. There was a silence, the kind that said everything words couldn't. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. No diamonds, no gold, just a simple silver ring, no luxury, no promises of forever. Just something real, he said. Will you marry me, Lydia? Tears glimmered in her eyes as she whispered, only if you promise never to forget where your heart truly belongs. He smiled, the kind of smile that only comes from finding home. I already know, he said quietly. It belongs to the girl who taught me how to love again. She took his hand, the billionaire who once had everything but love. And as they walked out of that small cafe together, hand in hand, the world finally felt right again. Because sometimes, the richest man is the one who finally learns how to feel.